Hi, everybody. Dr. Dan Weldon. I'm a consultant with Foundations Community Partnership, and today we're going to be talking about writing behavioral health grants. We'll be talking about the fundamentals, and most of the time will be spent talking about the fundamentals in grant writing. We'll start with talking about the trends, philanthropy trends, and grant maker trends for a few minutes, things that are the grant makers are looking for. So we're ready to go. Okay. The goals of the workshop. Number one, understand recent trends in funder expectations, including consumer satisfaction and community impact by diverse organizations serving a diverse population. Number two, learn why grant writing is important for nonprofit organizations. Number three, understand the typical grant life cycle. Number four, become familiar with the grant writing process, including writing goals and the due diligence process. Number five, be inspired to look around your organization to identify needs to fill or problems to solve. Three things funders want to know when they're reading an application. Number one, is diversity an integral part of the organization and its services? Or is it just an add-on? Two other things funders want to know. Is the organization meeting the consumer needs? Is the organization paying attention to its mission? We'll go over each of those step by step. This is a list of who your consumers are. Your consumers are more than just your clients. Your consumers are a whole bunch of people. And this is a short list. A few minutes of brainstorming, we could come up with many, many more. You might even think, is your board of directors a member, a consumer, or a customer of your organization? Things like that don't normally come to mind. How does the organization measure consumer satisfaction with services? There's multiple ways. Typically, there's emailed or mailed consumer satisfaction questionnaires, telephone surveys, in-person interviews, participant real-time data collection. How do the results improve the programs? How does the organization change as a result of the consumer satisfaction assessment? You might modify your program, change the program to meet the consumer needs. Geographic areas change over time. If your areas become gentrified, maybe you can just charge more money. But kidding aside, the demographic changes such as immigration may require the need for increased diversity of staff who better reflect the community and speak the language of the consumer. Service delivery improvements. Things are speeding up. Email isn't used as much anymore, especially by the younger crowd. Texting, Twitter, other technical improvements you might need to make in your organization as a result of your consumer satisfaction survey. Community impact. Again, just a short list. Some items may be on both the consumer list and the community list. For community impact, there's two types of data collection. One is quantitative. Quantitative are surveys. I'm sure all of you have come in contact with SurveyMonkey and other surveys like that. They collect data, but they do not provide explanations as to is the mission meeting its goals. Qualitative surveys, typically observations by staff, interviews, telephone surveys, telephone interviews are common, 10-15-minute discussion with a select group of people. to find out what their feelings are about your mission. Are you meeting your mission, or what you need to do to improve? Qualitative surveys are very good at answering the how and why questions, to add depth to your assessment. What is the expected impact on the community? Ultimately you're going to be looking at 3 to 6 years down the road. Describe how the community will be better as a result of your mission. Did it work? Did your project achieve what you expected? If not, what will you change? Your assessments may spark a review of the organization's strategic plan. Changes in the organization are often scary to staff, the community, consumers. They're necessary based on your data collection, but it takes courage. It's important to remember the grant funder is not collecting this data for its own needs. The grant funder doesn't need to know the answer to the questions. The grant funder wants to know that the organization is using feedback from the consumers and the community to evaluate success of the services and the mission. Is the organization keeping pace with changes in social expectations? Here's a bedtime story being read to an executive director. So the wealthy philanthropist fell in love with Cinderella's organization and funded it ever after. And the ED says, again, read it again. Fairy tale. This is a typical revenue stream for nonprofit organizations. Sometimes 1 and 2 are reversed. Some organizations have more fee-for-service revenue and less public funding. This is just kind of a generalization. I'm sure that many of the organizations participating today are a little different. But if they don't add up to 100%, regardless of your sources, you're in trouble. Grant writing is necessary in the nonprofit sector because typically only about 75% of a nonprofit organization's general operations revenue comes from services provided. That's regardless of whether it's fee-for-service or reimbursement from public sources or insurance companies. 25% must be obtained through philanthropy or fundraising activities. Number 2, unfunded mandates. I'm sure they're everybody's favorite. Regulatory bodies and insurance companies have had an increase in unfunded mandates over the years. Over 40 years ago, when I started in the hospital world, there were 2 major inspections. There was a Joint Commission, which came in every 2 or 3 years, very expensive, tied up a lot of highly compensated staff time, and but it was only every couple of years. There were also annual state licensing inspections that occurred, which again were very expensive because they tied up a lot of staff for several days. By the mid to late 80s, the HMOs were doing utilization reviews once a year. There weren't that many yet, but it was still thousands of dollars in cost to prepare for and participate in those inspections. When I left the hospital world a few years ago, the HMOs, multiple HMOs, were doing multiple utilization reviews 3-4 times a year, and there was not an increase in funding to make up for that. Also, any organization that works with children since 2012 has had to have all staff participate in a 2 to 3 hour mandated child reporting training. If you have 100 staff, 2 hours of training every year or 2, times $15 an hour average, that's $3,000, and that's unfunded. So unfunded mandates are the curse of a nonprofit. Number 3, Everyone knows that the cost of living goes up faster than the increases in public funding and insurance rates. They might be 5–10 years before there's an increase. Number 4, anyone who owns a house or a car knows that maintenance for these things goes up faster than your paycheck. And finally, grant writing is necessary in the nonprofit sector because many program improvements, such as specialized training for staff, state-of-the-art equipment, and new programs for consumers are not reimbursed by public funding. Most government funding, by law, is limited to the minimum amount that will do the job, not to optimum or state-of-the-art. If your patient needs a walker, you're lucky to get a cane. You will not get a wheelchair from the government. This is the gift. This is 8 pages of funders in the greater Philadelphia region, including Bucks County. This list was put together pre-pandemic, so the focus may have changed for some of these grant makers. However, they are still current. So this is in your packet. It's item number 1 in your packet. Frequently asked questions. These frequently asked questions will be addressed during the remainder of this workshop. I will give the short answers now for most of them. I'll spend a few minutes answering the questions at the end of the workshop. You're also welcome to contact me later with questions. My email is on the last slide. Number 1, mission alignment with Foundations Community Partnership. How is this evaluated? The evaluators, the grant evaluators, will compare the organization's mission and the services with the Foundations Community Partnership mission and services to see if they're in the same ballpark. Typically, an organization mission may not be in the ballpark. However, the project is in the ballpark. For example, the public school mission doesn't align well with the Foundations Community Partnership mission. However, a project that provides behavioral health or behavior management training for emotionally disturbed kids in the classroom, or even spruces up the playground for the school in a low-income neighborhood would be in the ballpark and would be eligible for funding. What's the difference between goals and objectives? Short answer. A goal is what you want to achieve. An objective is a measurable step along the way. How do you write behavioral health goals? More on that later. A lot more on that later. What is the role of the grant writer? This is important. Most grant writers are not program people. Some may be, but most are not architects or engineers. If the project is building something or adding space, they're not experts in whatever the program is going to provide. Grant writer is the scribe. Their job is to understand and translate the program or the project into the language that the grant funder understands. And get to that a little bit more later. Who reviews grant applications at Foundations Community Partnership? Typically, 3 or 4 board members will be assigned each application and will provide a review. We'll do an analysis. Always included is at least one mental health professional, licensed mental health professional, and at least one business executive. There may be others as determined by the nature of the grant, of the project. Number 6, should the nonprofit organization application explain financial discrepancies? Absolutely yes. Definitely, if you've had a loss, for example, in the past year or two in your organization, loss in operations in your organization's finances the last year or two, acknowledge it, explain it, and describe what you're doing to get back on track. Very important. Number 7, does FCP fund full-time salaried positions or employee benefits? The answer is generally no. Part-time, increased hours, or contract consultants To increase capacity for the organization's project, yes. Benefits, no, and not full-time. Now, there's one exception to that. That's a general operating support grant that's provided once a year. That's not the focus of today's workshop, but information is available on the FCP website if you're interested in that grant opportunity. Number 8, does having a financial reserve impact our chances of receiving a grant? Quick answer, it depends. If you have a financial reserve that's 2 or 3 times your annual budget, it's going to raise the eyebrows of the reviewer. Why are you asking us for money if you have that much of a cushion? On the other hand, if you have a roof that you know is going bad, or a heating system that needs to be replaced soon, or you're saving for a rainy day, a downturn in the economy, explain that in the application. That will go a long way in helping the evaluator understand your budget and your finances. 9, what kind of annual IRS or Bureau of Charitable Organization financial report is expected by Foundation's Community Partnership? The highest level that you're obligated to provide each year. There are 3 levels. An organization that has a revenue of $750,000 or more is required to provide to the IRS or the Bureau of Charitable Organizations a full independent audit. They're expensive, but that's the requirement. An organization that has between $250,000 and $750,000 annual revenue is required to provide an annual review in response to the application. The annual review is still CPA doing an audit, comparing the finances and your financial picture in your organization to standards. It's a little lower than the full independent audit. And the last that we will accept is a compilation, and that's $100,000 annual revenue to $250,000. That's just a CPA compiling, putting together your annual finances. And the typically nonprofit organizations who are seeking funding from grant makers will use the next higher audit than the one they're required to provide. The reason is because grant makers sometimes want the higher overview of your finances. For example, if you do a review, typically because you're under the $750,000 annual revenue, you might want to do a full independent audit every 2 or 3 years. It makes you eligible for more grant funding. Number 10, what is the grant life cycle? I'm glad you asked that question. That's where we're going. The typical 12-month grant life cycle starts with the letter of inquiry, the LOI, and ends when the project is complete and the progress reports are submitted and reviewed. There's a roadmap in your packet in case you get lost in the process, or you can always contact FCP for directions. We'll be going through this a little bit later. Let's back up. Your grant must be developed before it's submitted. There is a process for grant development. Typically, there are 5 steps to the grant development process. Notice the responsibility line. That's the departments with primary responsibility for each step. Most of this part of the workshop will be spent discussing number 4, developing measurable goals. We'll take these one at a time. Number 1, identify the need to fill or the problem to solve. Why are you asking for the funds? You have to have a problem statement or a statement of need. How does the problem impact the organization, the program, the clients, and the community? Number 2, identify the members for the grant development team. The grant writer should always be a member of this team. To the extent the grant writer understands the project, then your application will be that much stronger. Members of the grant development team, who can help develop and implement this project? Yes, obviously you're going to have some people that are going to be running the program or using the space. You might want 2 or 3 people to be involved, or at least one person to represent the people who are going to be the boots on the ground. Who's going to be using the space if your project is adding space? Who's going to be running the project or working in the project? It's always a good idea to get a point of view for any project from the people who will be operating the project. What department should participate? You know, it depends on the project, but you know, think about outside the box. You might want transportation. You might have dietary if there's going to be food involved. You might have maintenance, housekeeping if there's space where you're going to be setting up chairs for workshops, taking chairs down. You might want those people involved, maintenance and housekeeping involved as well. Anyone needed from outside the organization. Again, think outside the box. If you're going to be building something, you're going to need an architect or an engineer. If you're planning a project that's providing services to children in need of behavioral health in the county, maybe you want somebody from the county office of behavioral health or children and youth involved. Have you done a needs assessment? Maybe you're going to need somebody from outside to do a needs assessment. And very important and often forgot is, how about somebody who's going to be a referral source to be part of your team? Somebody who's going to be referring clients to your program. Make sure that you're meeting their needs as you're developing this project. Who is the leader? Everybody knows that a ship isn't going to sail straight without a leader, so there has to be somebody defined as a leader. Our roles of all participants defined. You don't want anyone who's part of your team to ask, why am I here? Why am I on this committee? Why am I part of this team? What's my role? That should be defined well ahead of time. Finally, what is the expected time commitment for participants? Everybody has to plan their calendar. So is this going to be 2 hours a week for 4 weeks? Is it going to be 1 hour a week for 3 months? That has to be spelled out ahead of time. Number 3, develop draft project steps and the budget. Then the first step is provide an overview of each step in the budget. That can be bullet points, but you have to kind of have an outline of where you're going with this project. It doesn't have to be real involved, but something just to give a little bit of a roadmap in the direction you're going in. Next is to provide an estimate of time for each step and timeline for the project. Very important. When do you see the project being implemented, ground being broken? When are boots going to be on the ground? How long is it going to be? And do you have steps along the way that you know you can accomplish? Next, provide an estimate of resources required for the project. Are you going to need supplies, equipment, vehicles? Make sure that they're thought about. Next, provide an estimate of personnel required. Like I mentioned earlier, you're going to need maintenance, program people, housekeeping. Who's going to be involved in this project? Next, establish the total cost estimate. Just total all of the above, sum the above. And finally, determine if the project is feasible and cost effective. Take the rose-colored glasses off. Now's the time to look at the project to see if it's worth pursuing. Don't waste time. You can build a better mousetrap, but if it costs too much or it's using too many resources, it's not going to fly. So now's the time to can the project. 4, take a deep breath, relax. This steps is the heart of this workshop. We'll be here for a few minutes. Okay. Two opposing philosophies with grant outcomes. social values model and the strict business model. The social values folks say 0% measurement or accountability is best. The business folks say 100% goal measurement and accountability is required. The social values and other 0% goal measurement proponents say there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. Why are we wasting time measuring data? Everybody makes up the data anyway. Why are we measuring goals? On the other end, the business folks, 100% goal measurement proponents, say giving away other people's money is not with no accountability is not charity, it's theft. We want the most bang for the buck. It's important to know where the grant maker falls on the continuum before you write the grant. FCP does not expect scientific rigor in goal writing, but FCP does expect reasonable goals that are measurable and make sense. We're in the middle. Einstein said sometimes things that can be counted don't, and sometimes things that can't be counted do. Right guy. Let's talk about goal writing. Typically, there are three elements for goals. Sometimes the goal statement and the objective statement are combined, by making the goal statement measurable. It's clearer to the reviewer if they are separated. Three kinds of goals. We'll talk about these one at a time. Problem statement. Why are you requesting the funding? Describe the problem or the need. Example, there are many families with food insecurity in our neighborhood at risk for behavioral health problems such as debilitating anxiety. The debilitating anxiety and behavioral health problems puts that in our ballpark for funding. Goal statement. What will the funding achieve? Example, we want to increase food distribution to low-income families and decrease anxiety. Sorry, I'm getting a little behind here. Problem statement. All right, I'll do this again. Problem statement. Why are you requesting the funding? Decrease the problem or the need. There are many families with food insecurity in our neighborhood at risk for behavioral health problems such as debilitating anxiety. Goal statement. What will the funding achieve? We want to increase food distribution to low-income families and decrease anxiety. Objective statement. In measurable terms, describe how the grantor can observe and verify the goal achievement. This is an example with two objectives. Objective 1. With this grant, our food pantry will serve 50 more low-income families per week, from 25 at the start to 75 families by 12 weeks. Objective 2. We expect 25% anxiety reduction as measured by the Jones Anxiety Scale over 12 weeks. If I get them all. Okay. Grant writing is easy. All you have to do is fill in the blanks. Three kinds of goals and objectives that FCP requires. And we'll go through these one at a time. Capacity goal. As a result of the grant, grant capacity will increase from some number to hopefully a higher number of participants within the time frame. How many people are you going to be serving with this funding? Might be maintaining the program that you already have, the number of people, or it might be increasing. You're asking money to increase your capacity. An example is, as a result of this grant, capacity will increase from 25 to 50 second grade students over 6 months. Program. Okay. As a result of the grant, number of sessions will increase from some number to another number within time frames. There's two ways to look at this. An example is, As a result of this grant, social interaction training sessions will increase from once per week to twice per week over 6 months. That's your sessions, whatever it is you're doing is going to increase. That's your program that's going to increase. Or staff will do something by time frame as measured by a count, an instrument, or a survey. If you start your program goal by the word staff will or program will, when you answer the rest of the questions, it falls into line with the program grant. For the staff example, with this funding, staff will reinforce selected positive social interaction skills twice per week for 6 months as measured by a social skill checklist. Client goals. These are the most difficult kinds of goals to write, the client goals in behavioral health. The client will demonstrate something by a time frame as measured by a count, an instrument, or a survey. An example, with the requested funds, we expect that the child will demonstrate 70% improved social interaction skills as measured by teacher observation, a survey or a count, even a checklist, from the beginning to the end of the program. Notice that these examples have all the parameters that we'll be talking about when we get more specific into different kinds of goals. Especially difficult goals. These are frequently the questions that I've had about the goals that the organizations have difficulty writing for lots of good reasons. Number one, goals that are difficult to observe directly, such as improved self-esteem. Number two, goals for high-risk, infrequent outcomes, such as victimization. Number three, goals that may be met beyond 12 months. Analogous goal writing. If you can't measure a goal directly, you can measure behaviors that are commonly associated with the goal. Self-esteem is very difficult to measure. I always say it's like me in a hardware store. I know what I want. I'll know it when I see it, but I can't describe it. And self-esteem is much the same way. So you can measure components of self-esteem. So improved self-esteem is hard to measure, but improved eye contact, better grooming, and more smiles demonstrate improved self-esteem and are easy to observe and measure. Analogous goal writing continued. Difficult goals. There are often three elements to goals: developing knowledge, learning new skills or practice, and implementing the skills. If you can't measure a goal directly, you can measure the improved knowledge, the improved skills, and the implementation of the new skills that research shows will lead to the desired goal. For example, it's difficult to measure decreased victimization, which may only happen once a year or less, hopefully. Instead, you can measure the knowledge learned in the program and the changed behaviors that have been shown to prevent victimization. If your application refers to a research article, add more than just a reference. Explain the research. The evaluator may verify the reference, but they won't always read the article. This also works for goals that are longer than 12 months to meet. Science. Don't run away. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. This is the straight line. This is what the grant evaluators, the application evaluators, will be looking for. This is what they'll see when they look at your application. Number one, the first question they ask is, what's the problem? What's the problem statement or the statement of need? Number two, how do you expect to use our money to solve the problem or meet the need? Number three, how are you going to measure, see if it worked? There are the three things that the grant, that's the straight line that the grant evaluator will be looking for. not a straight line. This is going all over the place. A long list of unrelated problems or questions, a long list of organizational accomplishments, vanity statements or fluff, a lengthy organization history and description of the wonderful staff, more fluff, lengthy but confusing project description, and lengthy description of goals without measurement. That's not a straight line. Clarity is essential for a successful grant request. Grant funders will not take the time to reread a grant that is not clear on the first reading. A hint, fluff equals self-indulgent marketing hype. Some self-promotion is okay to show ability to meet the goals, but don't waste precious characters or excess fluff in the application. The grant maker wouldn't be having the conversation with you, and they wouldn't be if they didn't believe in your mission or your project. Besides, like most philanthropy boards, the FCP board will only see a summary of your application with most fluff extracted. Remember the straight line. That's what the grant makers, the grant evaluators are going to be saying. Bad goals. Several different flavors. Vague, anything that sounds like our organization will do good things with your money. Or trust us, we know what you are doing. We deserve the money. We're doing God's work. We didn't make these up. We've seen these. They're simply, they are not behaviorally defined goals. Vague goals. Our program will improve some percent of anything without a baseline measure and a measure at completion of the project. An 85% improvement score is meaningless without the baseline. In fact, the grant reviewer looking at a goal like this might think without the baseline data, the reviewer may wonder if the project was 95% effective at the beginning and fell to 85% at the end. You need both the baseline data and the data at project completion. More bad goals. Lofty. Anything that sounds like our program will end homelessness in 12 months, stop drug addiction in 12 months, eliminate child abuse in 12 months, cure autism in 12 months, obtain world peace in 12 months. Obviously, I'm kidding, but vague goals are definitely not a good idea. But on the other hand, if any of the organizations can guarantee a positive outcome with these goals, I'm sure we'll find a way to fund it. Vague or lack of clarity, vague or lofty goals are the largest reason for failed grant applications. Theodore Cosell, a writer in the philanthropy world, says, choose a goal large enough to make a difference, but small enough to accomplish. Number 5, our final item in our steps to grant development. Complete the project development model. We're going to be talking about different. We'll be focusing on one type of model, but there are many types. A timeline, a simple timeline, is a model for a simple project. This the logic model is the standard for larger organizations to develop a project, especially if it's a very, very costly project. The 5-step logic model. This is an example of the 5-step logic model. Let me get it on my screen here. Okay. The steps 1 and 2 are for planning your project. Steps 3 and 4 and 5 are the actions that you're going to be taking to meet your goals or your goal attainment. Step 1 is what are your resources? Oh, this was developed by the Kellogg Foundation. They are the cornflake people, so this is a very basic model, but it's a common model. Step number 1, what are your resources? What are your inputs? What do you have available going into this project? Step number 2, in your brainstorming sessions, what are you thinking? What are you going to be putting together to meet your goals? in terms of your planning, your activities. Step number 3 is your outputs, your program goals. What steps are you going to be, what things are you going to be doing and accomplishing? How many sessions, how many trainings, how many classes, whatever you're going to be doing. Step 4 is your outcomes. They're your client goals. How are your consumers going to be different as a result of this project? And the last one is step 5. Your impact. They're your long-term goals. You're 2 to 3 years down the road. How is the family, the organization, the community going to be different as a result of your project? I put together a very quick example, something everybody can relate to. The dental hygiene program. The problem: second graders have too many cavities. Fewer cavities in 12 months is your outcome. I'm picking on second graders. I must be stuck developmentally at second grade. So that's your problem and your outcome. Step 1, your inputs or your resources. You're going to need a health teacher, dental hygiene curriculum, toothbrushes, toothpaste, dental floss, and access to second grade students. Step 2, your activities or your planning. You're going to need to educate the importance of dental hygiene. You're going to train the class in dental hygiene skills. You're going to measure the number of cavities at the beginning of the program and maybe compare that to the same age peers nationally. Step 3, your outputs. These are your program and your capacity goals. The program goals are going to be having, you expect to have 15 30-minute weekly education sessions, 15 10-minute weekly practice sessions, and 25 students at each session. That's your capacity goal. Your client goals, your outcomes. They're going to show improved knowledge of dental hygiene, better dental hygiene skills demonstrated, and the students will have at least 20% fewer cavities in 12 months from the beginning to the end of the program compared to same age peers. Now, if you put measurements on the first two, the improved knowledge and the better dental hygiene skills, the practice, they could be objectives. But finally, step 5, your long-term goal or your impact on the family. Better oral hygiene in 3 to 6 years, improved health overall, reduced medical costs, and fewer emergency dental visits. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Just one page. As I said before, a logic model can be simple or it can be very complex. I've worked in hospitals where purchasing a new hospital is on the table, and a logic model can be 50, 75 pages long. But this is a one-step logic model, something I think everyone can relate to, or most of you can relate to. Buying a house. The problem statement: I don't own a house and I want the financial and emotional benefits of owning a house. That's the problem statement. The goal is I want to achieve the financial and emotional satisfaction of buying a house, and security of buying a house. The rationales are things that you have available to you. You know that home ownership is a good thing. You believe that, and also you know neighborhoods that you might want to have a house in, buy a house in. The 5-step model. Resources are: you have steady employment. You have knowledge of potential neighborhoods that you want to live in. Well, you can read those. Let's just pick one. You have 12 Wednesday evenings free. Your activity groups, step 2, things that you're planning on doing. You're going to be doing some preliminary research, and you're going to be doing some financial preparation. But that's just pick one. You're going to be taking a first-time buyer's education program, which happens to be on Wednesday evenings. Your outputs, your program goals. you are going to take a look at the number of neighborhood options. You're going to put your financial records in order, and you're going to attend 12 weekly sessions for first-time home buyers. Step 4, your goals. Short-term goals are you've learned a lot. It's knowledge gain. You know about the neighborhoods. You know about mortgages. You know about home buying. You've learned things. And an intermediate goal, which is still part of step 4, is you bought a house. Now you're a homeowner. Your long-term goal is that you've increased your financial stability and and security, and you're happy. That happens to be the same as your original goal. So that's just a quick example of the logic model. A hint for the logic model: determine the desired outcome first, then start building the logic model. Start at the end. Hooray! Your grant application has hatched. Now we're going to be going through the grant due diligence process. Remember, I promised there was a roadmap for the grant 12-month grant life cycle. Well, this is it. So this flow chart is that life cycle roadmap that I mentioned. Feel free to contact FCP if you get lost in the process. Somebody will let you know where you're at and where to go from wherever you happen to be. The FCP grant application review process continued. This is item number 3 in your packet. The roadmap was item number 2. This is item number 3. The letter of inquiry is the organization's introduction to Foundation's community partnership. It introduces your organization and your funding request. There are no trick questions. You simply answer the questions, provide the information requested in the letter of inquiry. Simple things: project description, again, how you're planning on using our money to solve their problem or meet your need. Program area, a target population, funding amount, just brief things that the FCP will look at to make sure that your LOI meets the standards for FCP applications. There is a pre-grant interview if your LOI is approved, your letter of inquiry is approved. There's a pre-grant interview, also called an LOI meeting. It's always good to have a program person participate in this meeting. It can be embarrassing for the grant writer if the question is asked, and there will be questions back and forth at this meeting. If a question is asked about the program and the grant writer says, well, I'll have to get back to you on that. That doesn't make your application strong when that happens. So always have a program person involved in the pre-grant meeting. So the pre-grant meeting will look at the organization will be doing a review of the project, the program of the project. They'll be going over grant requirements, which is the next slide. And it's also on the website. There will be questions back and forth. The FCP will have questions about the application, the project, and the organization may have questions about FCP process. There'll be an overview of FCP due diligence. We'll go through each page that the reviewer looks at. There's no secrets. We're pretty transparent. And take a look at the previous funding for that organization to make sure all the paperwork's up to date. After the pre-grant meeting is completed, later that day, typically, the grant application form will become available next time you log in to the grant application software. This is the grant application. This is item number 4 in your packet. This is the grant application requirements. Again, it's on the FCP website. Be familiar with the funder's policies and requirements before you submit the grant. It's just always go over this page first for us, or whatever grant maker that you're applying to. Make sure you know what their policies and procedures are. It doesn't make the organization look good if you submit a grant that's missing an obvious policy or contradicting an obvious policy. This is the grant application. This is a program application sample. The application for a capital grant is very similar. Again, like the LOI, there's no trick questions. Just respond to the items in each section. Whatever you wrote in the LOI will migrate and populate the section in the application. You have the opportunity to change it. You have the opportunity to redo it, to throw it all out and start all over again. Whatever section that you're not happy with, or that you feel you have to change as a result of the LOI meeting. The little bit more detailed than the LOI. Again, the project narrative is very important. But you're also going to be taking a look at the community benefits, the staff qualifications. Project goals are very important, and other funders that are for this project and other funders for your organization also are important. In review of any application for a grant, the reviewer will be looking at project sustainability, which is simply what if we don't fund you again next year? How are you going to maintain this project? Or collaboration with other organizations in the county. We don't want to see organizations reinventing the wheel, so we want to see a high degree of collaboration. This questionnaire reflects the standards set by the Council on Foundations for Funders. It evaluates possible nonprofit organization drift away from eligibility for funding. It's a good self-evaluation once a year. Organizations do drift. There's mission drift, and there's drift in services away from funding possibilities, funding opportunities. If you do this once a year, even if you're not applying to FCP, it will help the organization stay on track. It's in your packet. It's item number 6. There are this page and the next page are some of the financial review tools that the evaluator will be using. This is the audit review form. The most recent audit should be uploaded that has been approved by the board, the organization board. We don't want an audit in draft or that hasn't been approved yet. We want the most recent audit that's been approved. That might be a year or more old, but we still want the most recent one that's been approved. The evaluator will be looking at the audit letter to make sure there's no qualifications. For example, did the management cooperate with the auditor during the process? The evaluator will also be looking at audit notes to see if the auditors had any concerns about the financial strength of the organization, and obviously the financial numbers, the financial statements in between will be reviewed as part of the due diligence. This was put together by Larry Mangan. These 2 pages. He was a CPA, does workshops on nonprofit financial analysis, and we've been to those workshops. Larry calls this the 10 elements of a healthy nonprofit. Column 1 is the test name or the name of the element. Column 2 is the description of each element. Column 3 is a formula that we will use to derive a ratio number that we expect to fall within the target ratio range in column 4. It's important to describe in your application or with an upload any variation from the expected financial target ratio range. Acknowledge the discrepancy, state the reason, and the plan to get back on track. The evaluator for the application may assume that you're not aware that you have a problem unless you acknowledge it and explain it and talk about what you're doing to get back on track. This page is item number 8. It's in your packet. Innocent looking piece of paper that the board will get at both the program committee meeting, or the grant evaluation meeting, and also the board meeting. Each row is an application that will have a summary of the 3 or 4 reviewers' comments and scoring. So each row represents one application, one organization. In the columns, the first column is the organization name, or the application name, then the organization name, then the type of grant. Is it a capital grant or a program grant? Is how much is requested? The next 5 areas are areas that are scored by the evaluators. 3 points each, maximum score of 15 points. The last column, each cell expands, are the comments, the highlights, the strengths and weaknesses that each reviewer wrote when they did the evaluation. This expands. It can be 4 or 5 pages by the time the board gets this, the full board gets this. The items that are scored. First of all, maximum score of 15. Typically, a minimum score of 13 is required to receive a grant from Foundations Community Partnership. Less than a score of 13, the organization will receive an information letter, which is questions that the board had about the application. The board members are not saying they can do the job better or that they are experts in that project. The board is saying we were confused by the application. The organization is invited in to talk about and answer the questions, and then invited to apply again next cycle. It's possible to get a score of 15, highest score that you can possibly get for this project, but still not get a grant. It's because that would be because the board, there's only so much money to go around, and the board felt that there were more compelling needs during this grant cycle. You won't get an information letter if in fact that's the reason why the grant is not funded. You'll get a very polite email that says, sorry, there wasn't enough money to go around. There are 5 areas that are scored. Number 1, a clear description of the history and the mission, and alignment, FCP alignment with the organization. Number 2, it's clear description of the leadership and the management for the organization and the project. Does the organization have the people power and the structure to successfully implement this project? Number 3 is central to good grant writing, a clear description of the need or the problem. Again, the three points. Number 1 on the line, the problem statement or statement of need. Number 2 is the narrative. How are you going to use our money to solve the problem or meet the need? And number 3, which is talked about in item 5, is how are you going to measure to see if it worked? Okay. 4. In the scoring is a clear description of the budget and the process and the finances. I showed you 2 of the tools that we use for financial evaluation. We also will be looking at the budget, both for the organization and for the project. Finally, number 5, a clear description of measurable goals within 12 months. Are the goals consistent with both FCP and the organization mission? And again, are they measurable within a 12-month period? There are progress reports that are due. The follow-up progress report. Most of our grants, there's just a final project follow-up progress report in 12 months. The program grants have a 6-month and a 12-month. Again, it's important that this be written with the team, not just the grant writer, because the grant writer may not have the depth to be able to answer these questions as to why the project didn't work, if it didn't work, why the goals weren't met, exactly what the changes were to achieve the goals, future plans and things like that. And you don't want a barren project report because that will reflect on your next application. So it's important to make sure that this is a team effort, not just the grant writer when you're providing the project report. That's it. I'm done. Time for questions.
I have a question, Dr. Weldon. This is Jessica Schwartz, Family Promise of Lower Bucks. Do you have any tips for do's and don'ts in staying within the character limits? I seem to struggle with staying within the character limits. And I want to, kind of want to get your advice on things that we should cut, things we shouldn't cut, besides obviously the fluff.
Let me give you the long answer. And then I'll end it with a short answer. The long answer is character limits on grant applications were developed for a reason. Before there was online grant application, there were page limits. Character limits were developed because the more time you spend in putting together a grant project, the more clear the project will be for the reviewer, and the less time will be wasted by the organization. In fact, Mark Twain, at the end of a long letter once to one of his friends, said, I'm sorry this letter is so long. If I had more time, it would be shorter. So grant limits are important. Character limits are important. What I've done when I've written grants, and I've been confused and maybe going a little bit too long and I can't shorten them, is I use what I call the grandmother test. The grandmother test is, and I'm making this up, I had my rickety old grandmother read it. If she understood it, it was fine. If she didn't get it, then I had to rewrite it. So you just have to do it and then redo it, have somebody else read it. There's no easy way. Best I could do.
Okay.
No, that was a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, Adele here from Teamwork Wins. Just wanted to thank you because it was very helpful. I don't actually have any questions, but you kind of answered all my questions. So thank you.
Welcome.
That's the best kind of presentation when all the questions are answered. That's good. And I'm just gonna add. You had FCP, and many of you have worked with us for quite some time. There's always the possibility, if you are confused in the process, or if you're thinking about multiple projects, don't ever hesitate to reach out to us. Absolutely. To talk it through. Share with us what you're thinking, because we don't want you to waste time on an application where we may have to say in the end, I'm sorry, we can't fund that. And Dr. Weldon mentioned, salary is always a big item in these applications, and we want to make sure that you clarify what salaries may be used for, if it's for a consultant or an increase of the staff person. That we might be able to fund versus full-time salary position, which we typically don't fund. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us and say, here's what I'm thinking, because then it will be better for us and the board who will be reading your application, and better for you knowing that you're putting in the time and effort into something that we're be able to review and not just say flat out no, and that we can fund that. And the other thing we talked early on about diversity, and this is really across the spectrum. And for those of you who have recently applied to us, you've seen an added question, which is not a scoring question. It's really more of an information-seeking question about your programs and how diversity, equity, and inclusion plays a role into that. And you're seeing that if you're applying to multiple funders, that those questions are popping up more and more in the grant application process. They may be asking about your programs, they may be asking about your staff, your hiring policies, your board of directors. So it's just something to be aware of if you aren't already, that this is something that is certainly from a grant maker side taking more of a priority, and that those questions will be more frequent. Here at FCP right now, it's not a scoring question, more so an information-seeking question, but some of the larger foundations are including that as part of the scoring process. So just want to give you the heads up on that.
Let me follow up quickly on something that Toby said about the salaries and benefits and things like that. We've worked with organizations who have had wonderful projects and have been in contact with us about that issue. Frequently, we've been able to guide the organizations and talk through a way for the organization to use their own funds for salaries and benefits and request funding for other parts of that project that we're able to fund. So we can do a workaround. So that's a possibility. Always reach out. We're happy to work with you.
Yeah, and definitely explain to us, especially if your budget contains just one line saying salaries and benefits without any explanation, then it's kind of hard to figure out where the FCP grant dollars would go versus what the overall budget reflects on. So definitely try to clarify that for us so that we know for sure where FCP's dollars will go to. Any other questions? If not, we're going to turn it over to Caroline, who, from our vantage point, is in the upper left-hand corner of our gallery view. And Caroline will briefly share with you about Foundant, how to find it, what this is all about. So Caroline, take it away.
Thanks, Toby. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's nice to see you all here. So this is going to be fairly brief. I will give you a quick overview of how you go from finding information on our website to logging into the Foundant online grant management system, just so you can, see someone go through it. And at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. The good news is the feedback we get from most of our grantees is that the Foundant system is very user-friendly, aside from being strict on character limits. So that's the good news. Also, the great news is that we recently updated our website. It's brand new and shiny, and we've added some more resources that you can access before jumping into applying for a grant that should provide some really useful information before you start the grant writing. Let me see if I can switch my screen, just one moment. It will just take a second. Almost there. Here we are. Okay. Ta-da! There is our new website. And aside from admiring the fresh new design, you can scroll down for lots of information about FCP, our programs, and what we're up to presently. As you can see, there is a section where you can jump straight into specific grant types, or if we go back up to the top, under the menu, you can also select the various grant types here, or read an overview of all of our types of grant making. This might be useful if you've never applied for a grant from us before. It helps just kind of set the stage with background information. And then down here, you can jump to the specific type of grant you have in mind. Let's start with Bucks Innovation Improvement Grant, because we are currently in our spring cycle accepting applications for big grants and capital improvement grants. So we'll jump over to that page. So here we are on the big page. It grant description, it gives the dates and deadlines. And this is a new feature directly on this page. You can view application requirements. I'll click there so you can just take a peek. I have to move my window down to close that now. Self-explanatory. This is the optional pre-grant due diligence review. So this also links to a PDF. I'll go ahead and click it even though I'm having trouble clicking out at the end. That's not what I wanted. There we are. So this is super useful. You can read through this document and you will have a good sense of, you know, how FCP will be reviewing the grant information. Here we have an LOI and application preview PDF, again, self-explanatory.
Your screen share went off.
Oh, thanks, Toby. There we are. So this gives you an opportunity to see exactly what questions are going to be in the LOI in the application. I think this provides a great opportunity if there's any sections that you, you know, could work on in a Word document. You can then do a character count. So you'll see here it says 1,500, then you'll have some idea where you are before you're in this form. And you can edit in your Word document and then copy and paste. Did screen share go off again?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, and finally, there's the found an applicant tutorial. That's another PDF. I don't wish to open it because I'm having trouble closing them and then staying on this screen. Finally, here is a link to bounce over to Foundant. There we are. To log in and start your application. I have my personal email address in here, but before I log in, I want to take your attention to this box here. There are more tutorials for using the Foundant system. So there is definitely a wealth of information. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and this is what you'll see. This is the applicant dashboard. With your information, you can always update your personal information as needed. All right. And to start an application, you click on simply apply up here at the top of the page, and then you will see each of the grant programs that we have or that we're currently accepting applications for. As I noted before, capital improvement and Bucks Innovation and Improvement grants. We're in our spring cycle right now. Technical assistant grants, those are year round, as are emergency action grants. Now let's stick with the BIIG grant again. Before you start your application process, hang on, I need to resize my window in order to get access to all the buttons. There we are, that's better. So again, you can preview the form to know exactly what information will be useful to have at hand while you're in there working. Let me bounce back there too. You can also click on that button, which is a PDF of the question list. So if you wish to print it, take it with you so you can read it kind of asynchronously and think about it, you can also print out the question list. So once you submit your LOI, depending on the grant program, in the case of Big and Capital, we receive the LOI, we review the LOI. If we have any questions, we would reach out to you. Otherwise, we would reach out to you to schedule a pre-grant meeting with Dr. Weldon to discuss the LOI that was submitted. And the next step would be to approve the LOI, and then the full application would open. At that stage, you can do the same thing here with printing out the questions, previewing the form, so you have a good sense of exactly what information you're going to need to provide. So that is kind of a quick bounce through our process from going to our website to learn about each type of grant program, over to Foundant and logging in and starting the application process. Does anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Caroline. I appreciate you giving the quick overview here. So both Caroline and Dr. Weldon are always available to answer any questions that you have. You can call me. You may not get the correct answer since I've only been here for a short amount of time, but you know, I'll try to fake it as best as possible. But that said, we certainly hope that you'll continue to partner with us, or if you're new to FCP, that you'll reach out and we get to know more about your organization and your team, and certainly take advantage of the grant opportunities. They are happening all throughout the year. Encourage you to go on the website, look at the deadlines. We have lots of opportunities to help build your programs, support your programs, support your team, your board. So don't ever hesitate to reach out so that we can figure out a way that we can support you and your efforts.
And
with
I'm
that
just
said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to jump in and say, in the process of, if you don't have an online login, user identity and found it yet, if you have any trouble or questions, feel free to reach out to me. Same goes for if you're working on an LOI or an application. Never hesitate to just send over an email or pick up the phone. Happy to help.